Hello and welcome to Basiltov, the courage and creativity of ADHD. I'm Jen.
I'm Ellen.
And I'm Annette.
And today we're going to be talking over ADHD and crisis. So I know people talk sometimes about going into crisis mode and, what does that really mean? And for neurotypicals, crisis mode can mean something like completely freaking out and melting down because, something big, major, and sensational has happened, like somebody gets in a car wreck or whatever. And a lot of people lose their heads, but there are some people who stay cool as a cucumber, who just kind of let things roll off or seem to always know what to do. Those people are ADHD people. So we're going to get into the science of why that is and what's happening really when you're going into crisis mode and it doesn't even seem like you're in crisis mode, and maybe what we can do to help out those poor neurotypicals who just can't get their shit together. The only time we can say this. I had to say it.
It feels like one of the ADHD superpowers, if you will, the ability to kind of calmly navigate a crisis from time to time. Not always, but a lot of the time.
Probably most crises can be navigated with a somewhat cool head and a much different perspective than a lot of other people carry into a crisis situation. So when we're dealing with crisis, we've got an immediate call to attention, and that's like a dopamine rush. So people with a normal level of dopamine circulating in their body, that's going to be like a dopamine overload for them. It's going to start frying tiny little brain circuits or whatever. I don't know. I'm not the scientist here. That's
we love garbage science.
Garbage science. So I just like to picture the neurotypicals with little brain fires. That's all.
Yeah. All that dopamine. It's like raining dopamine during a crisis. And neurotypicals are just like, what the fuck? They're just overflowing with dopamine. Can't handle it. Yeah.
Well, it's adrenaline. And it's your fight or flight reflex. And a lot of people will choose to run away, either mentally or physically, in a state of crisis. They either become paralyzed like a deer in the headlights, or, they run. And for 1,000 reasons, people with ADHD just don't tend to do that. We tend to be able to look at the situation very focused and start getting into action where everybody else is running around screaming fire.
Yeah, it's almost like you can kind of objectively look at this situation. It's almost like it's happening in slower time. You're like analyzing it like, oh, okay, this is what's happening here. This is what needs to happen. It's a problem that needs to be solved. That's what ADHD people do really well, is we solve problems.
Yep.
And then you just compartmentalize. Yeah, creatively, exactly. Impulsively and creatively. And then we can compartmentalize. So there's this really scary thing happening right now. This person needs CPR, but we're not even going to attach ourselves to the emotions of this situation. We're going to stuff that down, deal with it tonight, and, deal with what needs to get done.
And I think that you touched on something that's very interesting, because I would not necessarily say that in a crisis, normal neurotypical people would be feeling dopamine reactions. The reason why ADHDers feel dopamine reactions is because it's something we hyper focus into, and that gives us
piques
the dopamine
our interest.
Hit. Yes.
Yeah, we're interested in it and focused on it. Even if it's something awful and scary, it's like, oh, we got to
has our attention.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain
maybe
gets
it's
a boner.
because it breaks through the mundane, because ADHD people hate mundane stuff like paperwork and sitting at the DMV. Oh my God. So like, if something breaks out of the mundane, if something completely weird is happening, like, a gaggle of clown masked people with guns come into the DMV all of a sudden, you're going to be really super focused on that. All of a sudden it's interesting. Holy crap, I can focus on this.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, that would definitely get your attention.
Yep.
Exactly.
And then all of your years of watching dramatic movies and action flicks kicks in, and you're like, okay, look for the exits.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something I was thinking about today. I'm the inattentive type, and so my brain's a little different than you guys. I know that you both kind of have more of like an internal monologue a little more. We've talked about that, or like you can hear your thoughts a little more. Your thoughts are a little more active than mine, let's say. And so one thing I've heard about ADHD people is that they're constantly thinking about, okay, what can happen next? If you're driving on the road, you're focused, you're like, man, what if that truck just exploded in front of me? What would I do? Or maybe some of that's anxiety too. I think some of that's anxiety, but you're just constantly thinking, what could go wrong? And so when something does go wrong, it's like, oh, I already planned this out of my brain, so we're good. I know what to do now. So like, that's not something that I do necessarily, but I think that's something a lot of people do.
I totally do.
No, it's totally, yeah absolutely. Just the other day, I was driving on the freeway behind a logging truck, and there was all these logs, and I was like, what would happen if the logs just like started coming through and like hit the windshield and like tried to like crash into my car?
That's some Final Destination shit right there.
Yeah. And it's like, but I'm like thinking through all of the different scenarios just because I'm driving behind this. And I was like, maybe I should like not be driving behind this car.
Oh my gosh. This past weekend for Mother's Day, we went out to the coast, and there was part of the coastal highway, and anybody who lives in Oregon knows that the coastal highway every once in a while will just fucking implode. It'll just sink right into the ground because of landslides. So, and the coastal highway, the Highway 101, goes all the way from some part of Washington all the way down the coast of Oregon and into, I think it stops at Los Angeles.
No, it goes all the way down to Mexico.
Does it? The 101? I thought that was the 5.
The 5 goes all the way down, but the 101, it goes all the way down.
Okay. Nice. For some reason, I thought it stopped somewhere around Los Angeles.
No, because we used to take the 101 down to San Diego all the time.
We'll fact check. Okay. We'll fact check this after the episode.
I know, right? So we were driving along part of the 101 that had already collapsed before, because we could see part of the old highway down a ravine below us on the other side. And I was like, oh, look, it's the old Highway 101. Like,
wow.
And we were kind of chuckling about it, but then I sat there and I was like, okay, what if the big earthquake happened right now?
Yeah,
and all of a sudden the highway started sinking into the ground. What would I do? Like,
dude, yes. I know it's always those what if scenarios that come up in ADHD brains. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you have anxiety, I think.
Oh, I'm thinking of the 1. The 101 turns into the 1.
Okay. Highway 1.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's right.
She already fact checked it.
I get that confused too, since I grew up in California and Oregon. So thank you.
Yeah, and I grew up in Southern California. So, but it ends in Los Angeles. You are correct.
Yes,
Gold
I got
medal
something
for Jen.
correct today. But today was a day that I felt like I couldn't get things correct, like because there was a situation, a crisis, if you will, at my kid's school today, where there were bullets found in both of my kids' classrooms. And
oh my God.
Yeah, and they're not from this house. I'm just gonna, so like, spoiler alert, they're not from here. But
did they find them in another kid's backpack or something? Or like
they said that they searched the school and they searched desks of kids that they suspected to be at fault for this. And there was. So one of my kids' friends actually got pulled out of school early today because they thought he was the source, and they searched his desk and found nothing, I guess. And I don't know. So I don't know if there was something else to that or whatever. But then my son was telling me that there was a kid in his class who had a pocket full of bullets. And I was like, did you tell somebody? And he was like, no, nobody told anyone. And I was like, your whole class knew about this? And he goes, well, a lot of people knew about it. And I was like,
oh, geez.
All right, we got to call and tell them. So we ended up telling the school and, letting them know that we know at least one kid. But it still begs the question of how it got into a classroom on the complete opposite end of the school.
Yeah.
In a completely different age group. So that was also really strange. So, and
he's probably passing them out.
I don't even know. Definitely there was some bragging going on about having these things. And, yeah, so there's probably a lot to this situation that's just unknown by us anyway. But it makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to do something now, but what do I do?
Yeah.
So now I'm facing this kind of weird crisis situation where it's like, well, do I homeschool my kids again? Do I try to get them into a different school? There's no guarantee that this won't just happen again at a different school.
I know.
What to do. So sitting thinking about that. But something I didn't do was freak out, start crying. I had a very rational conversation with my kids about what to do if there is a shooter. And, since their action plans at that school just include hiding under desks, I told them to break the windows and leave.
God.
I was like, don't do that. Don't listen to your teachers on this one. It'll get you killed.
Yeah, dude, get the fuck out of there. If somebody starts shooting it up, break a window.
Yeah. Yep. Break the windows. Get the hell out. It's much better than just sitting around under your desks where you're just literally a sitting duck for stuff. So
it's really
we
sad.
had an unfortunate conversation that I felt like crying. I felt like being emotional, but I held on to it because, I knew that I would scare the crap out of them if I approached that conversation the wrong way.
Yeah, right. It's so hard to talk when there's a crisis like that, you have to talk to other people or your kids about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to, you kind of have to mask a little bit, hold it together.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there were so many feelings going through my head, why should I have to talk to my kids about this? Because some asshole out there is being really, really just irresponsible with their ammunition and their firearms. Why should everybody else's families have to suffer? All the people who are being responsible and all of the people who, have locks on these things or have some kind of control over the situation. And then you got these people who are totally irresponsible and just they should never have guns. These people should never have firearms in their houses because they can't keep them.
Our whole country is in a crisis. We're in a crisis right now with that.
Yeah.
So
yes,
you're navigating.
That's not a crisis that I have to deal with.
Yeah. So. You're good in Japan right now. You're safe over there. But yeah. So Jen, you're dealing with an acute crisis at your school, but also part of a larger problem, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we can, if it's fair to say that the United States has a gun crisis because it's been going on since we were kids.
I know.
Kids going into schools and shooting other kids.
You can't even
It's been so long that it doesn't feel fair to call it a crisis. It feels fair to call it willful ignorance.
Yeah.
It's endemic.
Crisis,
endemic to the culture.
Crisis kind of implies that it's a phase and you're going to recover from that, but we haven't really...
Or it's a one-off thing. It's a surprise. But at this point, when there's... Is there really any surprise if there is a school shooting at American schools right now?
It's expected now.
Yeah, but however, if your kid's school started getting shot up, that is in fact a crisis.
Oh, it is.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
that's true. Because then it's more personal to you.
Right.
Yeah, the individual actions, the individual events are a crisis, but the overall theme of it is no longer a crisis. It's more endemic in our society. And, we need younger representatives. We need people from our generation who are tired of not having gun control and who are not owned by the NRA and the gun companies to make good legislation.
At this point, the NRA should just be labeled as the terrorist organization it is. It's just like, we got to get these.
There's so much greed and corruption going on.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
We're not a political show. I guess we shouldn't get too far into the weeds, but
yeah.
It's a crisis.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Crisis.
Crisis. Yeah. Oh, you know what I like? You know what I like about that word? I know that I don't. Well, I love the author Glennon Doyle, but so it's like a quote from her. But she says that the Greek root of the word crisis means to sift, and so I like that. Yeah. It's like a crisis. It does kind of sift your life. It's like just instantly in that moment, only the important things matter. It'll just strip away everything that's not important. And so it's almost like the silver lining of a crisis, Yeah. Yeah. So I like that.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And like, and that really does like speak to me at this point today, because like I was having a conversation with my older child, the one who's, he's an adolescent at this point, and he understands far more than my younger one. And I was having to tell him stuff like, you break the windows, you tell as many people to follow you as you can, but you don't try to save them because they're not your responsibility. You just got to get out. And anybody who's on the floor, they're on the floor. You just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And like, and having to tell your child something like that is like gut-wrenching.
Yeah,
absolutely gut-wrenching, especially because I had to, also think about my other child. And he was like, well, do I go back for her? And so then there's the gotcha of, shit. Okay. So so then I had to tell him the unfortunate, go back for her if it's possible. But if she's down, you run.
God damn. This is a conversation no parent should have to have with their child.
No, Jesus. No parent should have to have this conversation, but we're getting to the point where it's becoming really normal. So use your votes, people. And that's the last political thing I'm going to say about it.
That's right.
So, yeah. So, but Annette, you've also had your own share going on over the past couple days of crisis mode.
Yeah.
How did you end up responding?
Oh, like I always do, just chill and, get everything done that needs to be done. And you put your head down and you do what needs to be done. And then after it's all done, then you start processing what happened. So, I've dealt with crisis many times. I was in the earthquake here in Japan, the huge one.
Yeah.
And, the tsunami.
That was scary.
I was the only one in my classroom who had any, because I was with a bunch of foreigners learning Japanese at the time. And, all of them from Scandinavian countries or China and, Korea. And none of them had experience being in a big earthquake. I'm Californian. I'm cool. And, but it was a huge earthquake. I've never experienced anything like that. And they wanted to run into the classroom. I'm like, no, everybody under the tables. That's where you're safe.
Were you on the ground level? How high up were you?
No, we were up on the 3rd or 4th floor.
Okay.
So, but the hallway was covered in glass mirror.
Wow.
And I was like, don't leave the classroom while it's still shaking. That mirror can break, shatter everywhere. It did.
Yeah.
I was right. But I was just like, everybody, you cannot be running downstairs while shaking is happening. Just chill. And I was totally calm. I was watching buildings out the window just swaying.
Wow.
And I was just like, cool, okay. And it was kind of exciting. And I had a good time, it sounds weird to say that. It sounds weird to say that, but I had a good time. I even now I'm like, that was kind of fun. It was like riding a roller coaster.
Wow.
And so this just yesterday, my husband has not been feeling very well recently, and he had a fever and had been coughing. And then yesterday morning he woke up and his fever was 39.8 degrees Celsius. So it's 103.5 or something. So it was a very high fever.
Yeah.
And he couldn't walk. He couldn't even stand up, barely. And so when he came downstairs at first, he was kind of walking, and he was like, I need to go to the doctor's office. And I was like, okay. So I started researching what doctor's offices were open. And because of Corona, there's a lot of policies being put around hospitals if you have a fever. So you have to call, or you have to make appointments. And he was just like crashing in front of my eyes. And I was just like, are you okay? And he was like, I think you need to call the ambulance. I don't know if I can sit in a waiting room.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. And so I handed the phone to my mother-in-law. She called the ambulance because I just didn't want to mess anything up.
Yeah.
So that was the logic. She was standing there. It was the logical
decision. You delegated that
task,
basically.
Yeah. So I got his health insurance card, everything ready for him to go. Went downstairs, opened the door for the ambulance, helped him down the stairs, and got him into the ambulance. They were hooking him up, and I was just sitting there waiting with him, and they were trying to find which hospital they could take him to. And so they said, okay, well, we're going to take him to this hospital. So you can ride with us. And I looked at him and I said, if I ride with you and he goes to the hospital, but he can come home, I'm going to need my car. So just tell me the hospital and I will meet you there. I'm going to drive my car.
Yeah.
And so I got out of the ambulance. They took him off. I grabbed my bags and everything, made sure I told the hospital staff what they needed to do, and like kind of updated them on the situation and updated grandma on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Grabbed my keys, went to the hospital. I've never been so happy that I studied Japanese in my entire life, because I had to fill out all of the hospital forms because I couldn't do it. And so, and I could understand everything, like literally everything that the doctors and the nurses were saying to me. Like, I've never understood so much Japanese in my life.
Wow, you were focused as fuck in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I came, I got everything worked out. I came home, got a bunch of his stuff together to take to the hospital, because the doctor said he had pneumonia and a quarter of one of his lungs was like infected, like fully infected. And so I went home, grabbed all of his stuff, and bought him some new pajama pants, because he really didn't have any that were in good shape. And I don't want to put him in old nasty clothes when he's awful. So I got him new underwear and new socks and some new pants, and went to the hospital, dropped that off, made sure everything was right. Then I came home and I had to tell my daughters, just like I said, okay, daddy's fine, but he's not coming home for a couple days, because it was safer for him to be at the hospital where he can get medicine right away. And so they were like, okay, nice. And they were fine. And then I taught English, and then my husband was himself, I think he was kind of delirious from the fever and sending me very dark messages. And I was just like, you're fine, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. So yeah, but even now, because he's still in the hospital, I haven't really like processed it. All I'm focused on is getting done what I need to get done. So as soon as I'm done with this podcast today, I'm going back to the hospital to bring him shampoo, because I forgot to pack that.
Oh,
so
that's sweet.
And get his laundry. So but while we're talking about this, I'm going to explain a little bit of the neuroscience behind why people with ADHD typically do better in crisis than neurotypical people.
Yes, why?
Yes. Don't rely on my garbage science.
No garbage science here. We don't. We reject that. Okay, so
you reject it. I think it's fun.
Yeah. We like our brain sparkles or whatever it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, on to the real science.
Yeah, I never got the sparkles. Okay, so I know that everybody has heard about brain waves, and you know that you have electrical impulses in your brain, and your brain has different wavelengths.
Whoa.
Now, typically people will break this into 4 different brain waves, but there's actually 5. And probably everybody is most familiar with the delta wave, which the delta wave is your brain wave while you're asleep or dreaming that's the delta wave. That's the slowest of all of the brain waves. And you need that in order to refresh your body, build memory storage. It's very important to your health and your brain cycle. So even though Ellen hates to sleep,
so boring.
Your delta waves, I know your delta waves are very important. Then at the most active brainwave is your gamma brainwave. And your gamma brainwave is responsible for all of your problem solving and concentration. So it's the fastest moving. The gamma brainwave it's usually, typically people will put 4 brainwaves and leave out the gamma. But neuroscience has shown that, the gamma brainwave is a distinct brainwave in and of itself, and it's responsible for your hard concentration, which is why people who concentrate a lot or do a lot of problem solving use up more of their mental energy.
So what are the other waves?
So that's your gamma. Next is your beta, and beta brain waves are just you being awake, your busy, active mind, thinking about the things you need to do. And the next one is your alpha brain waves, and your alpha brain waves are like more of a restful and reflective kind of brain wave, not completely activated into the task, but still kind of active, but not completely active. And your theta brainwave is an important brainwave for ADHDers. And theta brainwaves in a neurotypical person are the brainwaves like when you're feeling drowsy, when you're like feeling like you're getting ready for sleep, and kind of like the thoughtlessness and your mind goes blank brainwave because you're just tired. And the thing with the theta brainwaves and the alpha, theta and alpha are both the brainwaves that ADHDers tend to be hyperactive in. Like you spend more time in the theta and alpha brainwave cycles than you do in beta.
Okay.
And so the active brain thinking about, these are the things I need to do, that's not as activated. That's actually underdeveloped in most ADHD brains. Whereas the theta and the alpha brain waves are more developed. Now, there have a lot of studies have been done about neurological feedback as therapy, and training your brain to recognize the beta brain waves and learn how to switch those on and activate them in ADHD brains.
Whoa,
that is a field of
brain therapy.
Yes.
That's cool. It's like training your brain.
Ooh. Yeah, and that's a field that's a field of research that right now in therapy is being explored.
Oh, that's cool. So then, since we would have, the alpha and the theta brainwaves are the ones that we have that are really developed for ADHD, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
good.
They're overdeveloped.
Okay, so they're overdeveloped. So then if we also had the beta brainwaves that and we had them up to a really good level, we would be like superhuman.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well, maybe not, but but yeah, it sounds like we would have then an advanced brain or something like that. That'd be neat.
Yeah, and so that's actually a field of study right now, and there's a lot of focus being put on that kind of therapy, and there's science showing that it's very effective. And there's some research that shows that it doesn't do it so much, but neuro-linguistic programming is a very real thing. And so if you're using feedback theory, you can possibly train your brain to be able to, recognize when you're entering into a beta state or when you need to, and be able to train your brain that way. So it's kind of a very interesting field of study.
Wow.
Right now.
When are they going to invent? I just need someone to invent like a little machine you can buy and just, just a little device you put on that kind of gently shocks your brain or whatever it's doing,
Yeah. Like a portable EEG or something.
A TENS unit.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah.
That's funny.
Some kind of
I mean,
self-therapy.
I assume you could probably mess up your neurology using a TENS unit on your head.
Yeah, it might hurt.
Yeah. Well, it could interfere with electrical impulses in your brain. I read. Cuz I have a TENS unit, and I'll use it for like muscular pain or whatever, like if I like overexert. But yeah, like I was like, oh, I wonder if you could like shock your brain with it. And I looked it up one day, and there were so many warnings like, don't put this anywhere on your head or face. Like, but then there are some places that are like, no, you could use it on your jaw for TMJ, but you have to put it in a really specific spot.
Interesting.
So that you don't. And everybody's nerve paths are in a slightly different area, so you do have to.
Yeah, no really two brains are alike.
Yeah. I hope that in the future we kind of learn more about our brains, and maybe just get more. It'd be nice to have kind of a individualized report about like there's plenty of allergy tests out there and whatnot that you can get a report and see how your body processes foods. It'd be nice to get a report about your brain. Here's your brain roadmap. Here's your chemistry in there. Here's what's going on in there. Here's the neuropathways.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future we'll have more of that.
Maybe we'll be able to poop in a bag and mail it in, and they can tell us about our brain.
Exactly. How are they going to get a
nice callback?
You'd have to get a scan. Yeah. Hopefully for this one, there's no poop needed to put in the mail. Yeah.
Yeah, but so getting back to crisis modes, the reason that ADHDers tend to do better in crisis mode is because our brains are already operating in the alpha and theta brainwaves, and so when a crisis happens, our brains are already at a lower level. It's not hyperactive at all, so we kind of see the situation as it is.
Yeah.
And then because it's interesting, we hyper focus into it.
Aha.
And then that's how we get our dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm. It makes so much sense.
Dopamine.
And
sweet dopamine.
In those moments, we just kind of assess the situation, figure out what's important. What does our brain need to know to fix this problem? Yeah. It's almost like this moment of clarity. Sometimes.
Yeah, and that's weird, like, because I feel like in really tense situations, I do have like this overwhelming clarity that I lacked before.
Mm-hmm.
Like when my husband had a heart attack and I had to like react really quickly to that situation, I was just really clear and I wasn't freaking out. And like, I mean, I was a little bit shaky and I did have, feelings about it, but I was a lot calmer than I have seen some people become with health crises or issues, or, there are people who will just start wailing and screaming immediately and they just lose their heads and they can't function. And I'm just not like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So like just focused right in, doing what has to be done. It's interesting, like how everybody reacts differently to this. And I guess this is the benefit to having ADHDers out there in society is that we're going to be the ones who are like calm and standing our ground in the worst kind of crises.
Well, yeah.
And everybody else is going to be running around.
I think I read that a lot of people in kind of high stress, like action type jobs, like, paramedics, firefighters, like a lot of them have ADHD. They're just kind of called to that because they've always been like that. They've always been so calm in a crisis. But I bet they hate doing all the paperwork that's involved with their job. That's probably the worst part. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, I stand on stage in front of like tens of thousands of people, and like, where normal neurotypical people would have that fight or flight reaction kick in, I have nothing. Yeah. I'm just like,
you go for it. Yep.
It's no problem.
Yeah. I love that.
It's just time to perform then. Mm-hmm. Like you just go and do it.
Yeah. Get her done.
It's just a switch. Like it's kind of like, okay. I don't feel very different off stage than I feel on stage.
It's interesting.
So,
yeah. It's almost like we know what needs to be done and we're just going to do it to the best of our ability, and
Yeah.
compartmentalize it later. If there's anything that would be stressing us, we just kind of have to ignore that.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever find yourself in a zombie apocalypse, find the ADHD group.
Yeah, we're going to be solving problems, figuring out what to do. Yep.
Hold on. There is one crisis situation here.
Ooh.
Hey, children in the next room, shut up. Thank you. All right.
Crisis.
Sorry, everyone.
Crisis averted. Yeah.
Crisis has been averted. They know I'm in here recording, and they just have to go sit right outside the door and be like, no, God, why?
Because children don't care.
No, they don't. They don't. And let's face it, none of us are millionaires, and we don't have $100,000 studios that we're sitting in. We're just
we do it at
sitting
home.
in random spaces inside of our homes.
This is
what are you talking about? My home is my $100,000 studio space.
That's true. Unless you're net.
Unless you're net, you do have your own studio. There you go. Yep.
That's true. But I don't have that luxury. I just have
a closet.
A closet. And it makes sense because there's good acoustics in here. There's all this stuff blocking the sound. It's not echoey and crap.
I love my closet.
But yeah, because you're back in the closet.
Yep.
Pull out my gun. Why Jen and Ellen gotta be in the closet?
Oh,
my South Park reference for the day.
You're
welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
But I think I think this whole situation kind of brought up a good point. Is like when you're a parent, you are constantly dealing with crises.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Never ending.
I mean, I remember
ending.
when my firstborn was a toddler, I've always let my kids eat in the car because I'm a lazy parent like that. But I remember she'd be eating her like a hamburger, and if the burger patty shifted just a little bit and was off center in the bun, she would start screaming, "My burger fell down! My burger fell down!" Like it was a crisis to her that her burger had shifted a little bit. It wasn't perfect looking anymore. And I just remember being like, wow, here we go. Big feeling about this burger here. So yes,
well, I mean,
you're dealing with that over and over and over all day. Yeah.
I've totally had Madison or my daughter. Totally had my daughter do the same thing where it's like part of something falls apart, especially burritos. She'll like, "Oh my God, no, Mom, my burrito, no,
it's a crisis.
It's falling apart."
Yep,
yep, crisis.
So yeah.
Or if the cheese comes off the pizza, oh my God, it's all over. Yep.
But like, you know how a lot of moms like. I don't know if this is relatable, but it's like your kid will start freaking out and like in the middle of a supermarket, and like other moms would be like freaking out too, like panicking, like, "Oh my God, my kid is doing this." Like I'm just staring at my kids.
You were just unbothered. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I didn't see that as much of a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Because of judgmental people.
It's good. We can handle it when these little mini crises. How do you even say that? Crises.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they come up, it's just like no big deal. Although they do start to get annoying after a while. But
yeah, I agree. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have to make this episode very short because somebody stole my computer charger and I am on low battery.
All right.
Oh my gosh. Another crisis.
God, yeah. Goes with the theme. Well, this was good.
Yeah, it was a good day for talking about crises because they're just popping up all over the place. Chatty children, empty batteries. We've got it all. So everybody out there, crises can lurk around any corner. But if you're an ADHDer, you're going to be fine, more or less. You're just going to... Yeah, I know. Annette's frozen,
I think we might have lost Annette.
Uh-oh.
We lost the video, though.
She can hear us.
All right, we better wrap this up.
But her image is frozen. Oh my God, that's funny. Okay, so for listeners out there, thanks again for being with us, especially in our time of crises.
Yes, thank you.
And yes, thank you. And if you happen upon a time of crisis, just understand you've got this.
Yeah.
Maybe help out a neurotypical friend. I don't know. This is one of those weird scenarios where it's not like we're going to end this session going, hey, maybe you should get some therapy. We're like, hey, be a badass. Just keep going and being a badass. And now you know why we're badasses. Yay.
That's right.
So, yeah. So anyway, thanks again for listening. If you guys have any questions, you can always email us at basiltovpodcast@gmail.com or send us a note through our contact form at basiltov.com. And we will answer it up and also possibly mention you on the podcast too, whenever we go to answer that question. So thanks again, everybody. We'll talk to you later. And Basiltov.
Basiltov. Basiltov.